our land, glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Que l'on ouvre les portes, let the doors be open. Statements by members. Déclaration de député, the Honourable Member for Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, our community is mourning the loss of a much-beloved and respected man from a much-respected and honored family. Leo Akat Ali Bajwa passed away earlier this month at the much too young age of 71. Too young, given the legacy he's left us. A life well lived in the spirit and service of Surrey's robust diversity. Mr. Bajwa dedicated himself to nourishing our Pakistani community's links to its arts and culture as the largest promoter of programs and events that entertained and enriched. As a Muslim, he was a champion. And as a dad, Mr. Bajwa and his wife raised 3 great sons who serve today in medicine, the law, and the family construction business. This gentleman's reputation was as a straight shooter with a heart of gold. He never sought praise or recognition, he earned it, receiving the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award in 2013. To his wife Samara and his sons Amar, Afan, Zoab, and their families, we, like you, will miss him. May his memory always be a blessing.
The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Mr. Speaker, even in challenging times like these times, there can be extraordinary things. And I'm really proud today to talk about some extraordinary constituents in the great riding of Dufferin-Caledon. Jayden Padeashi, together with the support of his father, Coven, and his sister Isabella, successfully concluded their 2nd annual Food Bank Street Challenge. Jalen and his dad came up with the idea because food banks were suffering as a result of COVID-19 and a lack of donations. Why did they call it a challenge? Because once a person collected food, they challenged their neighbors to do the same thing. The extraordinary thing is, this challenge was mostly driven by children. And in the first year, they brought in 30,000 pounds of food. And in the second year, they brought in another 7,500 pounds of food, again, mostly driven by children. So I want to give a hearty congratulations on behalf of myself and everyone here today to Jalen, Coven, Isabella, and everyone that took up the Food Bank Challenge.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
25 years ago, the Government of Canada created the Canada Foundation for Innovation. Its mandate was to increase the capacity of Canada's universities, colleges, hospitals, and other organizations by investing in research infrastructure. The CFI has transformed the research landscape in Canada by giving researchers the labs and tools they need to think big and conduct world-class research. Since the start, the CFI has invested over $9 billion in almost 12,000 infrastructure projects at 170 research institutions across Canada. These investments have led to breakthroughs in such areas as health, AI, quantum computing, and the environment. I invite all members of this House to join me in congratulating the Canada Foundation for Innovation, led by President Roseanne Runta and her team, on its silver anniversary. Here's to the next 25 years of supporting discovery, exploration, and innovation.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, on the night of the 13th of July, a tragedy was avoided thanks to the quick reflexes of a resident of Saint-Constant, Marie-Ève Bouchard. Her spouse, Nick Saint-Jacques, suddenly had a heart attack and crumbled before the eyes of his children. Despite her emotions, instinctively, Madame Bouchard worked hard and ensured that the emergency services were quickly contacted, and she worked to reanimate her spouse. Thanks to her heroic sang-froid, Monsieur Saint-Jacques recovered well from the incident. Madame Bouchard showed great resilience, and she also reminded all of us that we should know how to do reanimation techniques. It saves lives, and that's what she did for her spouse because she was ready. Madame Bouchard, you are a true heroine, and I have great admiration for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Woodbridge.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year in February, we are proud to celebrate Canada's Black community. But 28 days are not enough to celebrate the contributions of pioneer Black Canadians. This year's theme is February and Forever, celebrating Black history today and every day. There are Black leaders here in the House of Commons, but also throughout the country. For example, in my riding, Shernan Martin, Isaac Olawoloff, Charlene Grant, and Chris Campbell work indefatigably to support Black entrepreneurs, families, youth, and women's well-being. They promote diversity in specialized trades and examples of excellence in the Black community. Black history is intimately linked to the history of Canada, with moments of passion, courage, and hope. Today and every day, we must amplify their voices. Let us celebrate Black History Month.
The Honourable Member for Desnate, Mississippi Churchill River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege to rise in the House today and congratulate newly elected Sass Party MLA Jim LeMaig on a historic victory in last night's by-election in the provincial riding of Athabasca. A proud member of the Clearwater River Denny Nation, Jim has been a voice for Northern Saskatchewan built around a career of community service. He served on the Council of the Clearwater River Denny Nation, holding the Education and Natural Resources portfolios. He also served as a member of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council's Board of Education. In addition to these roles, Jim is a retired member of the RCMP, who served many northern communities and First Nations. In its 114-year history, the Athabasca riding has only been represented by the Liberals, the CCF, or the NDP.
Goodbye.
Today begins a new, exciting chapter for Northwest Saskatchewan. I look forward to working with Jim to grow the North's economy, keep our communities safe, and make life more affordable for everyone across Northern Saskatchewan. Congratulations, Jim, on your historic victory.
Honourable Member for Don Valley East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to highlight the outstanding work of the Afghan women's organization, Refugee and Immigrant Services in my riding of Don Valley East. Adina Niazi, the Executive Director, and her entire team continue to empower women, their families, and Afghan Canadians in my community and more broadly throughout the GTA. From settlement services, advocacy, to humanitarian work in Afghanistan, the AWO has been a lifeline to so many people seeking their help. Speaker, this organization is helping people and their families build new lives here in Canada, some starting with absolutely nothing, having left everything they own behind and surviving the devastation back home. I've always been impressed by their passion, dedication towards helping others, and the success of their programs and the services they deliver. Speaker, we are lucky to have such an organization here in Canada, and I want to thank them for all their work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm honoured to rise in this House to celebrate the life of Evelyn Gertrude Powell, better known to those who knew her as Betty. Betty was born in Ontario and raised in Cape Breton. She was the proud wife of a brave Canadian soldier and raised 4 boys in the Armukto PMQs at CFB Gagetown. Betty gave all she had to the people around her, whether it was through her famous tea biscuits, singing in the choir at church, delivering the blessing before a meal, or being the last to leave the Legion for cleanup after a function. Betty is a charter member of the Ladies Auxiliary Branch 93, serving for over 50 years as a color guard on Remembrance Day. She was the Goodwill Ambassador for the Fredericton Capital District, a dedicated fundraiser for the Heart and Stroke Foundation, among many other causes. A model volunteer, including running the Dolphin Senior Swim Club at the University of New Brunswick and being the secretary for the Armukto Sea Cadets. Betty's always believed in our great nation. She's always had a deep respect for our democracy, our institutions, and Queen Elizabeth. She's even the recipient of the Queen's Jubilee Medal. Betty embodies the definition of selflessness and has made the world a better place for her contributions. Betty is my grandmother. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation is at 5.1%, its highest level since 1991. Last week, I received a letter from a constituent. He said, and I quote, "I just got a natural gas bill in the mail. I have never seen my gas bill go over $350 a month. For this month was $645. $120 was for carbon tax for the feds to squander. It's a tax grab, and I'm upset. I'm on a limited and a fixed budget. This hurts me financially. I know the Prime Minister could care less about me and my family. He figures my budget will balance itself. I love our country, but my family just cannot afford him and the Liberals. Sorry for venting. I have to go and figure out how to pay my bill for the month." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Canada Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians dispose of 3 million tons of plastic waste each year. This waste pollutes Canada's rivers, lakes, and our oceans. As data shows the serious impact of single-use plastics on our environment, all Canadians can appreciate efforts at every level of government to transition to sustainable alternatives. Mr. Speaker, in my past role as Deputy Mayor and City Councillor here in Ottawa, I worked with the City of Ottawa administration to eliminate the sale of plastic water bottles from the city's administrative, recreation, and cultural facilities. I'm proud to share that the city has just announced that as of the end of June, Ottawa's facilities will no longer distribute or sell plastic water bottles. Instead, Ottawa residents can turn to water fountains and water bottle refill stations in municipal facilities. I highly commend the city for taking this step and look forward to supporting more initiatives to achieve the government's goal of zero plastic waste by 2030. Thank you, Mr.
Great job. The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the good people of Princeton, British Columbia. They, as many in this place may recall, are a small rural community of less than 2,000 citizens struggling mightily to rebuild after devastating flooding. After that flooding, the Prime Minister told the good people of Princeton not to worry. He had their back. He would be there for them. And now, Mr. Speaker, the bills are due. It was reported in the Similkameen Spotlight that the Prime Minister's office gave Mayor Spencer Coyne a special phone number that told the mayor that it was they told the mayor that it was a special link to call if in trouble. Well, Mr. Speaker, the mayor has called that special link. And you know what he was told? Talk to the province. Mr. Speaker, I hope everyone in this place can agree. When the Prime Minister makes a promise to have someone's back and to be there for them, the Prime Minister must be a man of his word. Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, recently a constituent of mine in Parry Sound, Muskoka told me the nightmare she experienced trying to access parental benefits after she spent weeks in Sick Kids Hospital with her newborn. She sent her paperwork for parental benefits to Service Canada in late August 2021. She delivered her baby in September, and only yesterday finally received her benefits. Service Canada at every step of the way told her that they were overworked and they were still learning how to deal with COVID. Mr. Speaker, this was late 2021, 2 years into the pandemic. In a riding like mine, where many seasonal workers and folks who rely on the EI program, the excuse we're still learning how to work with COVID is just simply not good enough, Mr. Speaker. At a time when restaurants and businesses are reopening and learning how to live with COVID-19, it is time for this government to do the same and ensure that the services delivered to the people that need them are done in a timely fashion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The President of Ukraine has declared February 16 as the Day of National Unity. Canada has over 1.3 million people of Ukrainian heritage and millions more that are watching closely and care deeply about what is happening in Ukraine today. The Canadian government continues to work with its allies to support Ukraine in whatever way we can, which includes supplying defensive weapons. On this day of Ukrainian solidarity, let us all in our own way recognize the importance of Ukraine and support the very principle enshrined in Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, the respect of sovereignty and independence. To the people of Ukraine on this day of solidarity, know that you have a friend in Canada, unwavering in our support. For Ukraine, and along with our physical support, comes with it millions of prayers. I stand today to support the call for Ukrainians and friends of Ukraine worldwide to stand united as part of a global solidarity campaign. Long live Ukraine, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, every year on February 22nd, Girl Guides celebrate World Thinking Day. It's an opportunity to speak up on issues that affect girls and young women, commemorate the founding of Girl Guides, and celebrate with the over 10 million members of the guiding movement around the world. In my province of British Columbia, thousands of Girl Guides light up their communities year-round through leadership, community service, and efforts to create a better, more equitable world. Thinking Day is usually marked with large gatherings, campfire sing-alongs, community events, and special camps. But due to the ongoing pandemic, instead this year, Girl Guides will celebrate the sisterhood of guiding in a COVID-friendly way through guiding lights across Canada. Outdoor landmarks, bridges, buildings, and stadiums will be lighting up in guiding blue in support of girl empowerment. In Victoria, you can admire the lights at City Hall, Government House, the Legislative Assembly, and the steamship terminal. To all guiding members this World Thinking Day, shine your guiding light.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate an extraordinary career which will be ending on February 25th. After a career which spanned nearly 38 years, Sylvie Brosseau will move on to a well-deserved retirement. For 38 years, she filled different positions at NextDev, which is the Haut-Richelieu Region's economic development agency. She was Director General since 2019, and she piloted several critical files for the region's economy. She was unequaled in her competence, but she is also extremely kind and committed. I only have positive things to say about her. She was a positive leader and deeply understood the issues and the business milieu of the region, and she knew everyone. Sylvie was a woman who brought human warmth to our economy. Sylvie, you are leaving very big shoes to fill, and you can now finally take a well-deserved retirement with some time for yourself. Happy retirement.
For New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, Liberal, NDP, and Green MPs defeated a motion calling on the federal government to provide Canadians with a plan to lift restrictions. Supporting this motion would have allowed the Liberals to demonstrate they are committed to ending mandates and restrictions, but that did not happen. The Liberal government instead invoked the Emergency Act. This is the reformed War Measures Act that gives Ottawa and police sweeping and never-before-used powers. The Emergency Act suspends civil liberties. The Prime Minister thinks he looks strong, but he looks weak, being unable to lead Canada while respecting our rights and freedoms. Invoking the Emergencies Act is a dramatic misuse of federal powers. It is a deep stain on Canada's reputation as a defender of rights and civil liberties. Totalitarian regimes around the world are delighted. For if Canada does this, who could say they could not do the same when their capital cities are filled with people objecting to their policies?
The Honourable Member for Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. February is Black History Month. It is a time again to learn about the histories and culture of Black Canadians and how they have contributed to Canada. I would like to recognize the hard work and inspiring leadership of some key Black leaders in Ottawa. John Adeyefa, Hector Addison, Shahada Alolo, Chucks Imahibe, Thomas Nagwa, and Francis L. of the African Canadian diaspora. Franklin Nipape, Andre Azambo, Germaine Basita, Justin Matarenia, and Alain Lutala of the French-speaking African Canadian community. June Girwan and Godwin Ifedi of the Black History Month, Ottawa. Ingrid John Baptiste of the Caribbean Canadian diaspora, Abdullahi, Rubol, and Ali Jama of the Somaliland Canadian community. There are dozens more I could name, but my time is limited. To all of the simply phenomenal black leaders in our community and across the country, we say thanks.
Oral questions, question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, it's clear the Prime Minister has more of a political emergency on his hands than a national emergency. The borders at Coutts, Surrey, Windsor, and Emerson have all been cleared. There are no more blockades at any borders. Trucks are still here downtown in Ottawa, and they need to move. But in light of the rapidly changing landscape, can the Prime Minister tell us where is the serious threat of violence to Canadians for ideological purposes, which is the threshold that needs to be met for the Emergencies Act?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the invocation of the Emergencies Act is not something to be done lightly. It is not something to be done as a first resort or even a second resort. But it was necessary to be done to give local law enforcement across the country the tools to handle these illegal blockades, to be able to ensure restoration of order, and to make sure that Canadians, whether they're losing shifts or are seeing supplies delayed on the way through the borders, be able to get back to their daily lives. This is a decision we took, and of course, Parliament is going to have an opportunity to debate it.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Limitations to Canadians' fundamental freedoms must be justified and must meet a legal criteria. Experts across the country have said these requirements have not been met. The Prime Minister hasn't given Canadians a clear reason why he's invoking the Emergencies Act. In fact, things are de-escalating as we speak. So why is the Prime Minister using this hammer on Canadians? Isn't it true he's doing it just to save his own political skin?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past few weeks, Canadians have been suffering, whether it's because of border crossings, whether it's because of illegal blockades in their neighbourhoods. This is something that required extra tools that we have put in law enforcement's hands. Now, of course, law enforcement, the local law enforcement jurisdiction, can use these tools or not as they're available. But the threshold was met for the Emergencies Act, and now across the country, police of jurisdiction have the tools necessary to keep people safe.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister calls people he disagrees with racist, misogynist. He spent the last month wedging, dividing, stigmatizing, and traumatizing Canadians. I understand the Prime Minister admires basic dictatorships, but let's remind the Prime Minister this is Canada. This is not a dictatorship. The Prime Minister is actually pouring gasoline on embers. Isn't it true the Prime Minister is doing this for one reason and one reason alone? It's to save his own political career.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Conservatives simply can't have it both ways. They spent weeks complaining that we weren't doing enough to restore order in this country, and now when we move forward to give people the tools they need.
I'm going to have to interrupt the Right Honourable Prime Minister. I've been getting emails from people who are watching us at home, and they're pretty ashamed of their parliament because of the shouting that goes on. One person brought something up. They said, well, all the shouting happens at the beginning. Why not start with the end questions? If this continues at the beginning, I'm going to the last question, turn my list upside down, and we'll start at the end. The Honourable Prime Minister, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives can't have it both ways. They spent the first few weeks of this challenge and illegal blockades saying that the government needed to act and take responsibility. And then when we finally move forward in a responsible way, when the time was right to bring in the Emergencies Act, they're now complaining that we've done too much. At the same time and throughout, Mr. Speaker, they continue to stand with and support and cheer on these illegal blockades. Mr. Speaker, they're the ones playing politics.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
From the man who wore blackface more times than he can remember, took a terrorist tourist with him to a trip on India, gave Omar Khadr $10 million. We're not going to stop talking to our constituents just because the Prime Minister disagrees with them. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says he's following science when it comes to mandates, but that's not what Canada's top doctors are saying. It's time to end the mandates and the restrictions. The Prime Minister is ignoring the science. There is a mental health crisis in this country, and continued lockdowns and mandates keeping Canadians separated are making it worse. So will the Prime Minister commit to Canadians he'll follow the science?
Well, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the invocation of the Emergencies Act is something that is extremely serious and that we have taken extremely seriously. It followed specific steps that were taken that will continue in this House. It followed consultation with the premiers, and it gives the tools in a proportionate and responsible way to the officers of jurisdiction to be able to end these illegal blockades. This will be a moment that will be studied in the history books, and what people will see was the Conservatives never stopped playing personal partisan politics.
Let's try the honourable member for Kitchener Centre. I believe he has a question today.
Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt the pandemic has had a devastating impact on our mental health, putting further strain on a system that already had long-standing gaps. In Waterloo, Wellington, 15 children and youth were waiting to be seen by child psychiatrists at CMHA before the pandemic. Now they have 190 on the waiting list. The fact is, mental health is health. As called for by the Canadian Alliance on Mental Health and Mental Illness and others, will the Prime Minister prioritize funding and legislation to ensure every Canadian has timely access to inclusive and accessible mental health?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't agree enough with the member for Kitchener Centre. Mental health is health. We must ensure it is a full and equal part of our universal healthcare system. It's why we're committing to establishing the Canada Mental Health Transfer to expand the delivery of high-quality, free mental health services. We want to encourage all Canadians who need support to check out wellnesstogether.ca for resources and download the Pocket Well app, available 24/7, where you can access a range of resources, including free and confidential virtual sessions with social workers, psychologists, and other professionals.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers speak for themselves. Alcohol and substance abuse, suicide, domestic violence, and child abuse have all increased over the last 2 years. These are not just statistics. These are real Canadians who are dealing with real heartache. And unnecessary mandates and restrictions are hurting us all. Science has saved lives, and the science is clear. We can start to open up, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister trust the numbers, trust the experts, and tell us when he'll end the mandates and the restrictions?
Honourable Prime Minister.
You know how difficult these past 2 years have been for Canadians with this pandemic, but we also have demonstrated that throughout it, Canadians have each other's backs, just like this government has had Canadians' backs with vaccines, with rapid tests, with supports for small businesses, workers, and families. And we will continue to have people's backs and follow the science. That's why we were pleased to announce loosening of the restrictions on borders as travel is more available to Canadians, and we will continue to follow the science every step of the way to keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In hindsight, and having read documents about the Emergencies Act, we get the feeling more and more that this is a cover-up, an attempt to cover up the government and the Prime Minister's failings. The National Assembly is unanimously against, and the government of Quebec is unanimously against, and the Bloc Québécois is against, and Quebec Conservatives are against the Emergencies Act. Why doesn't the Prime Minister simply apply this law in the provinces that want it? The Honourable Prime Minister. For 2 weeks, the Bloc leader was calling on the government. He was urging us to take firm action
to crack down on these illegal blockades. So we took the step of invoking the Emergencies Act in a proportionate and responsible way, fully consistent with the Charter. And this will enable jurisdictions that don't need it to simply not use it. And now he's finding something else to criticize. That's his job as leader of an opposition party. But my job is to protect Canadians. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. His job is to serve Canadians, Mr. Speaker. He's not supposed to do a disservice to Quebecers in order to serve Canadians. The current Prime Minister of Canada should be more conscious than anyone else, more aware of the sensitivities in Quebec to resorting to the War Measures Act in its new form. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada has always been there for Canadians in need, including Quebecers, when there were challenges around long-term care. The Government of Canada sent in support through the Canadian Armed Forces. We have now provided assistance to police forces all across the country. They will be able to use the tools necessary or not use them in these difficult times. We are fully respectful of Quebecers and Canadians, but we will give law and order the resources they need to protect the rights and freedoms of all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a national crisis because all levels of government have failed to acknowledge the seriousness of this crisis. On top of that, we see a glaring difference in the treatment of Indigenous and racialized protesters as opposed to the way that convoy is being treated. Canadians are deeply concerned about that. So what is the Prime Minister going to do to address the serious concerns that people have that there is a disproportionate treatment of racialized people and Indigenous people as compared to the convoy, and what will he do to fix that?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a government for a number of years now, we've recognized systemic racism and pledged and worked towards reducing it. The reality that racialized Canadians, Indigenous Canadians face worse outcomes and treatments from our justice system, from police systems, is one of those things that we have pledged to counter. We work closely with Black and Indigenous communities to make sure that we are reducing the barriers and ensuring equitable treatment, particularly in moments of crisis like this one.
For Burnaby South.
We're in a national crisis, and it needs to be resolved. But it's also important to make sure that that the Emergencies Act is not applied in areas where it's unneeded. Will the Prime Minister promise not to apply the Emergencies Act where it's not needed? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Emergencies Act was invoked in a reasonable fashion, in a proportionate way, and in a way that it can be localized or targeted to where it's needed. It gives local police more tools if they need them. And if they don't need them, they don't have to use them, Mr. Speaker. That's how our solution is reasonable. It's a reasonable implementation of the War Measures, the Emergencies Act. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Bellechasse. Mr. Speaker, last Friday, the Prime Minister said the Ottawa Police had all the resources they needed to end the standoff. Then suddenly on Monday, he invokes the Emergency Measures Act. What happened between the 11th and 14th of February to justify these decisions? And on what legal basis is he now trying to deflect attention from his flagrant lack of leadership, Mr. Speaker? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Emergencies Act is not the first thing that we should resort to, or even the second thing. The idea is to ensure that the necessary resources are available to law enforcement so they can do their job. We've been there from the very beginning, providing more resources to the Ottawa Police and other police forces all around the country. And on Monday, we decided to invoke the Emergencies Act in order to give them even more tools. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, Premier Legault has the situation under control in Quebec, and other provinces don't want the emergency measures to apply in their jurisdictions either. This looks like a partisan game. Can the Prime Minister explain why the whole country should have to suffer the consequences of the local situation in Ottawa? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the illegal blockades have consequences all across the country. We've seen blockages at the borders all across the country, and this is an emergency that required the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So we've given local police tools that they may use, but they don't have to use them if they don't need them. That's how the Emergencies Act works, and it's fully compliant with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms wherever it applies.
The Emergency Measures Act is a declaration of a state of national urgency. It is a blunt force tool that should only be used under the most serious circumstances when legal powers have been exhausted. The Canadians do not believe that this Prime Minister has exhausted all efforts. The Emergency Measures Act gives extraordinary powers to the government. The Prime Minister would have received judicial advice from judicial officers. When will this Prime Minister make that advice available to the public?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservative Party is trying to have it both ways. They spent the first few weeks both complaining that the federal government wasn't acting while encouraging the illegal barricades, and now that the federal government has put in the hands of local police officers justified, proportional, measured tools that will absolutely conform with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they are now complaining that we have acted. We will continue to do what is necessary to keep Canadians and their communities and our economy safe.
Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Canadians are tired of talking points. They want real answers. The Prime Minister's own words created fear. What are we going to do with these people? These people are taking up space, he said. These are the words of a failed leader who robbed Canadians of hope and of unity, and that is why they took to the streets. When will this Prime Minister stop doubling down on his failed leadership and admit that it is his divisive words and mandates that led to so much turmoil in this country?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike what the member opposite believes, the vaccine mandates we came forward with in this country saved lives. The vaccine mandates for travelers, for federal public servants, contributed to one of the highest vaccination rates in the world by Canadians. That has kept people safer. It has allowed our economy to come roaring back and has allowed us to get through this challenging pandemic better than most. Unfortunately, Conservatives are now supporting illegal blockades that are harming our economy. That's not what...
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Earlier in question period, the Prime Minister said that the Emergencies Act should not be the, quote, first or second thing that should be used to resolve a crisis situation. What were the first and second things that the Prime Minister did? And how does the failure of those actions provide legal justification for the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we began to see illegal blockades in place, we made sure that the RCMP was there to offer resources to local police of jurisdiction, to work with the OPP, to ensure that the support and planning was there for the police of local jurisdiction to take action. As time went on and these illegal blockades became more and more dug in, we saw that there was a need for more and more tools until it got to the point where Canadians' livelihoods, threats Canadians' well-being, the residents of Ottawa being severely impacted, threats of violence at border crossings across the country.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The problem with that argument is that the illegal blockades at the Ambassador Bridge and the Coots crossings occurred prior to the Emergencies Act being involved, without federal help. And the Emergency Act was not needed to settle the rail blockades of 2020, the HoC crisis, the crisis at Caledonia, September 11th, the COVID-19 pandemic, or any other dispute in Canadian history. The Prime Minister has not provided any legal justification for the use of the Emergencies Act, a historic unfettered power grab. He needs to calmly tell Canadians why he has failed and what is different today.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the invocation of the Emergencies Act is not something to be done lightly. On that, we absolutely agree. That is why not only did we lay out the rationale and explain to Canadians why we're doing it and how we're doing it, not only why we made sure that the new powers are circumspect, are proportional, are to be used only where they are needed, but we also are about to have days of debate in the House on exactly these questions so that parliamentarians and indeed all Canadians are able to see that this was necessary.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the Prime Minister to read his own order in Council before reading his answers in the House. It doesn't say that the provinces can opt in or opt out. It says that the federal government can choose to intervene or not. Secondly, I would ask the NDP to think seriously, given the history of a party that courageously opposed the application of the War Measures Act back in the 70s. This is shameful to compare. It's shameful to compare the army being sent in to help with the pandemic to this situation. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has been difficult for everyone in Canada. Too many loved ones were lost. We saw things that we used to take for granted being limited. We had unprecedented challenges with mental health in our communities. But every step of the way, Canadians were there for one another. They had each other's backs, whether it was frontline workers in Quebec or emergency responders in BC. People stood up for their neighbours. We saw the best in Canadians. It brought the best out in them. But now that we're seeing illegal blockades all across the country, we have to support Canadians. The honourable member. I'm not convinced, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister realizes what this situation's been like for real people. Does he realize that health is a matter of Quebec and provincial jurisdiction? Does he realize that he shouldn't interfere? Does he realize that he has fallen flat on his face? Does he realize that resources that were used to deal with a health problem are now being marshaled for a security problem in a most inappropriate way? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We have transferred billions of dollars to the provinces and Quebec to help them out, to help them get through, all Canadians get through the pandemic. Billions of dollars. We spent 80% of the funding to deal with the pandemic. 80% of it came from the federal government and tens of billions of dollars. I understand that the Bloc is absolutely terrified that we've been so present to help, but we will be there as long as necessary to help out.
Optimistic, hopeful vision for public life isn't a naive dream. It could be a powerful force for change. If Canadians are to trust their government needs to trust Canadians. Those are the words of the Prime Minister in 2015. These people, very often misogynistic, racist, women haters, science deniers, the fringe. Same Prime Minister 6 years later as he fans the flames of an unjustified national emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, when did the Prime Minister lose his way? When did it happen?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag. We will choose to stand with Canadians who deserve to be able to get to their jobs, who be able to get their lives back. These illegal protests need to stop, and they will, Mr. Speaker.
I just want to remind the honourable members, including the Right Honourable Prime Minister, to use words that are not inflammatory in the House, and that's for both sides. The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Unbecoming as a Prime Minister. It's been 48 hours that the government went from doing nothing to a national emergency. 48 hours into using the measures. 48 hours without providing Parliament with a justification. So my question is simple. When will the Prime Minister admit that he's lost control of the situation, that he's lost control of his country, that he's lost control of his caucus, and that he's lost control of his leadership?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of caucus and support for these blockades, the Conservative politicians need to make a choice. Are they for the blockades, or are they for communities, our economy, and regular Canadians? The member from Provencher pointed out about the emergency blockade, the illegal blockades. He has never seen such a patriotic display in Canada. There's nothing patriotic about hurting fellow Canadians. The member from Grand Prairie Mackenzie claims that the economy is not being held hostage. All the while, hundreds of millions of dollars were being lost in trade due to blockades. And the member from Sarnia-Lambton doesn't believe her constituents need guaranteed access now to the Blue Water Bridge. Mr. Speaker, we stand with Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, in 2020, when anti-energy protesters were blocking vital transportation, ships were backed up in ports and trains were stopped. The Prime Minister didn't stop them. In fact, he actually sent a government delegation to meet with them. But now that the protests are about something that he disagrees with, he uses inflammatory language, hurls personal attacks, and makes a massive power grab. We know the PM finds democracy inconvenient and that he admires China's dictatorship. So will the Prime Minister admit that this is all just a move to crack down on dissent?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would advise the honourable member to be careful in that line of questioning before people actually look into what he and his fellow Conservative Party members said.
Dictator. I want to remind the honourable members that shouting names at each other is not the way this place works. No. Before you start clapping, start looking at your own benches. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, people across this country have noticed the difference between the words and the rhetoric of the Conservative Party of Canada in regards to Indigenous protests, in regards to Black Lives Matter protests, in regards to marginalized people asking for their rights, versus what we're seeing here of illegal blockades that are hurting regular Canadians, and even talked about the potential overthrow of a duly elected government. That is not what is responsible for the Conservative.
Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives denounced the blockades of vital transportation routes in 2020, and we have denounced the same blockades this time, Mr. Speaker. The only thing that has changed is the Prime Minister's reaction. When he agreed with the anti-energy protesters, he let them continue for weeks and even offered a settlement. This time, he grants himself unprecedented powers to attack those he disagrees with. Canadians do not want to live in a country where the Prime Minister gets to personally decide which protests are legitimate. So once again, isn't this all just about cracking down on dissent?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have always stood up for the right to peaceful protest. We have always stood up for the right to freedom of assembly or freedom of expression. Mr. Speaker, these illegal blockades are hurting Canadians, are hurting their livelihoods, and are hurting the well-being and endangering the well-being of people in communities across this country. But the former leader of the Conservative Party points out that they have stood against the blockades. Unfortunately, many members of his party have stood with these illegal blockades and even encouraged them to continue blockading their fellow citizens.
Honourable member for Burnaby South.
We're in the midst of a national crisis, and this national crisis has exposed some real frustrations that Canadians feel. Canadians that have gotten vaccinated, that have followed the public health guidelines, are looking at a rigged system where billionaires and millionaires make out like bandits, increase their wealth, where working families and working class families are struggling to get by. So what is the Prime Minister going to do to respond to the frustrations of Canadians who can't put a roof over their head, who are having struggles to put food on the table? What is he doing to respond to that real, legitimate frustration?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way through this crisis, from the beginning of the pandemic, we've had Canadians' backs with unprecedented supports for our health system, so people could get tests and vaccines and health supports, so people could get wage subsidies and rent subsidies to keep small businesses going and to keep people in their jobs. A direct support for seniors, for youth, for working families, for mothers. These are things that we've moved forward on to have Canadians' backs, and we will continue to be investing in housing, in immigration measures, in the measures that are going to be supporting Canadians into the future.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Cette crise nationale a exposé des inquiétudes, des injustices dans notre.
This national crisis has exposed people's frustration. People who are vaccinated are following public health measures and they're frustrating. Billionaires are making record profits while everyday people have trouble making ends meet. Is the Prime Minister ready to respond to people's frustration with measures that actually meet their needs to solve the problems with the increasing costs of living and finding affordable housing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in my last answer, I spoke a little bit of what we've done since the beginning of the pandemic. But also, we need to do more to move forward. I would emphasize, however, that there are families throughout the country, like in Alberta, like in Manitoba, and elsewhere, families who are saving hundreds of dollars a month due to more affordable daycare spaces. We've had a direct impact on people's families through affordable daycare, and we hope that Ontario will sign on and be part of that solution as well.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act was introduced in the Senate last week for their study and comment. As a member of the House of Commons Standing Committee for the Environment and Sustainable Development, I look forward to reviewing this legislation when it comes to this place. Could the Prime Minister comment on the importance of this legislation in helping us to address the climate crisis, as well as recovering clean lakes, rivers, and streams, and providing ongoing protection for our environment? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member from Guelph for his important question and his tireless advocacy on behalf of the environment. This bill is a big step towards strengthening the protection of Canadians' health and the health of our lakes, rivers, lands, and forests from harmful chemicals and other toxic pollutants. This legislation can help us all become better stewards of our environment, making Canada a better place for us and for the generations that follow. I encourage all parliamentarians to work together to pass this bill as soon as possible.
Well, member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, 2/3 of Canadians want to see COVID restrictions and mandates lifted. We have amongst the highest vaccination rate in the world, but Canadians are still living under restrictions that many other less vaccinated countries have lifted. Canadians want a plan for ending restrictions, and they are incredibly disappointed that the NDP and the Liberals blocked our Conservative motion asking for one. So, Mr. Speaker, if 32% of the vote is good enough for the Liberals to form government, why isn't 90% good enough to lift mandates?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, for 2 years, Canadians have been there for each other, and all of us together, we've followed the science. We've made sure that people get vaccinated. We've made sure that people have access to rapid tests. And every step of the way, we will be ensuring that we're doing exactly what's necessary, both to keep people safe from COVID, but also to get back to the things we love as quickly as possible. I was pleased to see this week the lifting of a number of restrictions around international travel. We're going to continue to monitor carefully and ensure that we follow the science as we keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only thing this Prime Minister has made sure of is that he has politicized this pandemic and divided Canadians at a time when we should be working together, when we should be supporting one another. His lack of leadership has divided, stigmatized, and traumatized Canadians. Provincial premiers are leading the way, giving hope, confidence, and rebuilding trust in leadership. When will this Prime Minister follow their lead?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the 90% vaccination rate in Canada shows that Canadians have actually never been more united. The stories we saw throughout this pandemic of people being there for their neighbours, people there to support frontline workers, people there to support their communities, demonstrates the ability to which Canadians have stepped up to be there for each other. Yes, there have been people who've been harassing and intimidating frontline workers. Yes, there are people involved in illegal blockades, but the vast majority of Canadians continue to stand alongside each other and support each other, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Speaker, 2/3 of Canadians are united because they want an end to mandates and lockdowns. But this Prime Minister said they're, quote, racist, misogynist, a fringe, who, quote, take up space, and he said shouldn't be tolerated. Security experts say the Emergencies Act is a, quote, absolutely unprecedented excessive overreach, and half the provinces oppose it. But this PM's pattern is failure and top-down division. He's gone from name-calling to nukes. Isn't this really about the Prime Minister taking a sledgehammer to Canadians that he thinks are unacceptable?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe the member opposite misspoke. I think it's actually 100% of Canadians who are tired of this COVID pandemic, who are tired of having to be restricted, of having to be impacted by this pandemic around the country and around the globe. We all want to get through it. However, the way to get through it is by following science, by keeping each other safe, by being there for each other. The way through this pandemic isn't to engage in illegal blockades that are harming their fellow Canadians.
L'honorable député de Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the government of Quebec announced the end of the vaccine passport and presented a detailed plan for reopening with clear objectives. How is it that the federal government can't do the same thing? Even the member for Louis-Hébert criticized his own party and recommended raising restrictions. The Prime Minister is using the pandemic for partisan and electoral purposes to save his job. When is he going to withdraw all of the country's public health measures? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member full well knows that the public health measures are applied for the most part by the provinces. At the border, the federal government is responsible for them, and I'm pleased to be able to highlight that for a few days now, we've announced a change in our posture at the border, and we're going to make it easier for vaccinated Canadians to travel abroad. That's a good thing for Canadians. We'll continue to follow the science, to raise restrictions, because that's what Canadians want, and it's what we all need.
Député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The Prime Minister was referring to investments made by the federal government during the pandemic, and I will remind him that these are investments that were funded through credit. It's Canadians and Quebecers' money, and that's a debt that he's leaving behind for Canadians and Quebecers. And without trying to impose conditions before giving health transfers, he should have given more money regardless. He shamelessly reminds everyone of the darkest events in the country's history. Is he aware that we don't need him to go to the bank and we don't need the Emergencies Act to deal with the crisis in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians from one end of this country to the other have gone through 2 extremely difficult years with tragic losses, with personal and collective sacrifices. And every step of the way, the federal government was there for people. Free vaccination, investments to help small businesses and big businesses and workers and families and seniors. Every step of the way, the federal government has been there, including for Quebecers. And that's what's disappointing the Bloc Québécois, the honourable member for Belleuil-Champlain. The Prime Minister seems to be enunciating the cause of his own failures. What is the justification for invoking the Emergencies Act? There should be a certain amount of consensus within the House before invoking such an act. The opposition is against, the Bloc Québécois is against it. I invite the NDP to think carefully about this subject. Does he recognize that there were other means to act and that it was illegitimate to impose this legislation onto Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's important for everyone to know that the Emergencies Act is structured in a very clear way. We are following it to the letter. We are carefully implementing it. From the beginning, we recognized that we had to target those measures, that citizens should always enjoy the protection of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that the Act would only be used when it was needed by local authorities.
Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, I've never seen such shameful and dishonorable remarks coming from this Prime Minister. My great-grandfather flew over 30 missions over Nazi Germany. My great-great-uncle's body lies at the bottom of the English Channel. There are members of this Conservative caucus who are the descendants of victims of the Holocaust. For the Prime Minister to accuse any colleague in this House of standing with the swastika is shameful. I'm giving the Prime Minister an opportunity. I'm calling on him to unreservedly apologize for this shameful remark.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve their freedoms back. Mr. Speaker, these illegal blockades that have continued to interfere with people's livelihoods, to interfere with people's daily lives, have
to interrupt the Honourable Prime Minister, so ask everyone to calm down so we can hear the answer. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the measures put forward in this Emergencies Act are proportional, are responsible, and quite frankly, are completely folded within the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The steps that we are taking are important and measured to restore order and freedoms to Canadians in this country. That is exactly what we are doing.
Well, member for Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the lack of an apology from that Prime Minister speaks volumes. I have given this Prime Minister an opportunity to retract a shameful remark where he would accuse any honourable member of this House to stand with a swastika. As I said before, we have colleagues who are the descendants of victims of the Holocaust. I'm giving the Prime Minister one more chance. Will he apologize to all members of this House?
That's the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the members of the Conservative Party are calling to us to take more action over the past 2 weeks on this. They continued to stand with and encourage these illegal blockades. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are watching carefully and see exactly where the Conservative politicians who've stood with those blockades are standing. We will stand on the side of Canadians who deserve their lives back, who deserve their livelihoods back.
Member for Sturgeon River, Parkland.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I didn't write these out. But the fact is, I don't know how any member of the government caucus can stand by this Prime Minister when he accuses honourable members of this House of standing with a swastika. I'm calling on all members of the Liberal caucus to denounce the Prime Minister. I have given him 2 chances to apologize. He has refused to apologize. Mr. Prime Minister, apologize.
Once again, I want to remind the honourable members, I know this is getting emotional, but place your questions through the Speaker, not directly to each other. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These illegal blockades have been going on in Ottawa for 20 days now. People have been interrupted in their daily lives, have been made to feel fearful, have been made to miss shifts at their work across southern Ontario. These are things that cannot be stood for, which is why we're moving forward with a responsible set of measures to allow the local police jurisdiction to do their jobs. We continue to defend freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, as long as it's peaceful and legal, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member, l'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
Mr. Speaker, the tourism sectors and travel sectors have been hard hit by the pandemic. Businesses and organizations in those sectors are very excited and looking forward to getting more people, more vaccinated people to travel. Can the Prime Minister tell us more about lightening public health measures at airports? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for all the work that he's done in his riding of Lac-Saint-Louis. Measures for travelers are evolving as the pandemic changes. Based on public health recommendations as of February 28th, we're going to raise restrictions for flights to international destinations. That will help to support local tourism and create good jobs and growth for our economy.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-l'Érable.
Monsieur le Président, aujourd'hui,
Mr. Speaker, today, the Prime Minister clearly demonstrated that he's only interested in one thing, getting out of the crisis he himself created. His lack of leadership is the only thing to blame for this crisis. He talked about the history books earlier. Well, he's going to be thinking about history because he will be described as the Prime Minister that showed the least amount of leadership. He's hardly answered any of the opposition's questions about real reasons for revoking the Emergency Measures Act. What we see is that the Prime Minister himself is in a crisis in polls, in his party, in his own caucus. Why is he putting his own interests ahead of the nation's? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of these illegal blockades, we have been there to support police forces in order to solve the illegal blockades. As we saw that we needed to provide additional tools, which we did responsibly and carefully Monday night. We're offering help where it's necessary. That's what Canadians expect. While the Conservatives continue to encourage these illegal blockades, we are acting to help local police to end them. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can insult all Canadians. That's not leadership. Canada has never been more divided than it is today. This is what happens when a Prime Minister chooses to play the great politician instead of acting like a leader. He doesn't hear the discontent in our ridings, in his party, in his caucus. He doesn't hear the discontent in the entire country. That's the reality. Can he tell us why this Prime Minister is always slow to do the right thing, but always ready to snap to it and do anything when his reputation's on the line? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I understand. And we have heard just how tired people are of this pandemic. They're tired of the measures that they need to take to protect each other. We want to get through it. But I will remind the member for the Conservative Party that the way to end the pandemic is not through illegal protests. It's by following the science, by acting responsibly, and progressively changing public health measures, and by getting vaccinated. That's what Canadians have done. The unity of the country when it comes to vaccination shows how we will always be there for each other. The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Well, when this Prime Minister had an opportunity to act as a head of state before COVID, he chose to play politics. He called an election in the middle of a pandemic, which allowed him to divide Canadians and stigmatize those who didn't think like him. He imposed vaccines on truckers without any scientific support. He demonized and ridiculed some of his own citizens instead of listening to what they had to say. He hid instead of facing the music and accused others of not doing their job. That's enough. When will the Prime Minister apologize to Canadians for politicizing the public health crisis? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, during the last election, which the Conservative Party did not win, Canadians were consulted on the issue of vaccine mandates and public health mandates. Canadians voted mostly for members of Parliament who supported mandatory vaccination. Public sector workers, especially for travel in airplanes and on the train. It's Canadians who chose. And we've seen with a rate of vaccination of about 90% that Canadians are united and they will continue to be there for each other.
Rural Agent Court.
Mr. Speaker, immigrants from coast to coast to coast have significantly contributed to the prosperity of this country and of my riding of Scarborough Agincourt. Last year, we exceeded our goal of welcoming over 401,000 immigrants that will make Canada their home. This was a historical record that will help shape Canada's growth. Can the Prime Minister update this House on our government's plan to welcome more newcomers in the coming years?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, immigration is and has always been essential to Canada's success. This pandemic has highlighted the contributions of newcomers to the well-being of our communities and across all sectors of the economy. It's why we tabled our most ambitious immigration levels plan yet. This plan will welcome more newcomers in the coming year and will continue to help key sectors of our economy. It'll help staff almost 1 million unfilled positions across all sectors. Will also help filling in for the 5 million Canadians set to retire by 2030.
Hear, hear. Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many Canadians are raising serious concerns that the Emergencies Act should not apply to legal protests. We know that there have been many counter-protesters who are standing up to the convoy, and we've seen some of those counter-protesters arrested by police instead of the actual convoy. So Canadians raise a question: what assurances will the Prime Minister provide so that legal protests are not impacted by the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, excellent question, and one we are also very much preoccupied with, which is why in the measures set forward, we've been very clear to indicate that illegal protests, illegal barricades, illegal blockages are the ones that we are giving extra tools for the police to respond to. Of course, we will always stand up for Canadians' charter rights. We will always stand up for freedom of peaceful assembly, of freedom of expression. That is extremely important. But we also know that it is the police of jurisdiction who need to do their jobs and not Canadians taking things into their own hands to end these illegal protests. That's what we're ensuring with this measure.
That's all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. Before we get to, I notice there's a few points of order. Before we do, I just want to remind the honourable members that when the Peace Tower was inaugurated in 1927 as a memorial to Canada's First World War sacrifice, Prime Minister Mackenzie King called the carillon the voice of the nation. Since 2008, Dr. Andrea McCready has been the soul behind that voice as Canada's Dominion carillonneur. Au moment
In the most joyful and the most painful moments of our country, Dr. McCready gave voice to our feelings. Thanks to her artistic talent, her compassion, and her love of life, she told our history, but also our stories from everywhere in the country.
The rehabilitation work on the parliamentary building has now reached the Peace Tower. And on February 18th, this Friday, the carillon will fall silent for several years. The Dominion Carillonneur will continue to work with young students of the instrument, but will sadly have to do without her recitals for a while. I will miss Dr. McCady's performance more than I can say, and I know that all members join me in thanking her for her irreplaceable gift of making the bells of Parliament speak for the people of Canada. Thank you. Now we have a point of order. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I am a strong Jewish woman and a member of this House and a descendant of Holocaust survivors, and I have never it's never been singled out, and I have never been made to feel less, except for today when the Prime Minister accused me of standing with swastikas. I think he owes me an apology. I'd like an apology, and I think he owes an apology to all members of this House.
I want to encourage all members to be as judicious as possible when using words in this chamber and to reflect on what they say on all cases. L'honorable député de l'Amitis-Matane-Matapédia.
The honourable member for L'Amitis-Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, there have been consultations between the parties, and I think you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that this House, following on the unanimous motion in the National Assembly in Quebec, is concerned about the border blockades in Ontario, but states that none of this justifies the use of the Emergencies Act and special legislative measures, and act the federal government not to use the Emergencies Act on Quebec territory, and that this House underscore the need for close collaboration between the federal government and the government of Quebec in order to maintain safety for citizens of the Outaouais region who are experiencing repercussions of the situation in Ottawa. All those opposed to the honourable members moving the motion will please say nay.
No, nous avons pas.
We do not have unanimous consent.
Point of order, the honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I think you will find unanimous consent to adopt the following motion: that the House, A, stand firm in supporting sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity in the face of growing Russian aggression in and around Ukraine. B, strongly condemns the Russian Duma's vote recognizing the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, which would be a clear violation of the Minsk agreements and a threat to the security and stability of the region. And C, call on the international community to stand together in opposition to any further Russian aggression and support Ukraine and its people in the face of these growing threats.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed? The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. Rising on a point of order, the honourable member for Regina Capel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to carry on with the point that was made by my colleague from Thornhill. You'll know, Mr. Speaker, that when comments made in the House are so injurious, so insulting, and so unparliamentary, they rise to the level of a question of privilege, Mr. Speaker. And as you know, you have the ability to rule on that immediately. what the Prime Minister did. I won't even go into the hypocrisy of the man who did blackface so often he can't remember it, accusing somebody else of doing anything remotely racist. But his comments made to a Jewish member of this House are beyond unparliamentary. They are reprehensible, and I would ask that you rule that this rises to the level of a question of privilege, and I am prepared to move the appropriate motion, Mr. Speaker.
I will take that under advisement and return to the House should I see fit. We have someone else who has a point of order as well. The same point. Okay, we'll carry on. The Honourable Minister for... I'm sorry, I was going to say families, yes.
Emotions are obviously running very high right now, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to take a step back and reflect on what the values of this House are. I am also a proud Jewish woman who is the descendant of Holocaust survivors, and my family found refuge and support and a life in this country. And Mr. Speaker, we must listen to each other, and we must assure that no one in this House is standing with those who support white supremacy, who support Nazi views, who look to contribute and enable racist views. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all of us in this House use our words judiciously, including the member opposite who just yelled out something completely inappropriate, because all of us have reason to be here, and I would call on the members opposite not to stand with those who are sharing those views, because how does it feel as a person in this House seeing colleagues taking pictures with people who are looking to overthrow the government? That's what I ask those colleagues to do.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am rising on the same point of order. I understand that we are all fairly agitated at this moment. Can you imagine how what happened in this House today is impacting Canadians who are very aware of...
If I can interrupt, I'm afraid the translation isn't happening. The interpreting isn't happening. And please make sure that the headset is functioning.
Scott. We got one.
It's not...
Just one moment.
Where's the... what's Scott Reed?
Just a moment. Sorry, can you hear me, Speaker?
We'll wait till the Honourable Member gets her microphone working. In the meantime, we'll go with the Honourable Member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think we should engage in an exercise in comparative victimhood credentials here. I will observe that I, too, have Jewish ancestors. My grandmother was born in Bialystok. She came here, fortunately, before the Holocaust occurred. But of the 10,000 Jewish residents of Bialystok when she left, only 500 survived World War II. I would just say that it's not for the member opposite, although I know she spoke sincerely to speak out on this. It is for the Prime Minister to come back and retract his words. The Prime Minister is very good at apologizing for acts that took place before he was born by people he wasn't involved in. It's time for him to take responsibility for his own words and apologize for what he said.
Before we go to the Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville, this is evolving into a debate. I mean, if the Honourable Members would like to call this back as an emergency debate or something along that line, or bring it up as a motion, I think that's where it would be more appropriate. But for now, we'll go to the Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Speaker. And I would just like to voice as well my perspective on this. I think it's really important that the Prime Minister do the right thing and apologize for the statement that he made today, especially in reference within this House, but also to the fact of how this statement has been abused and used against Canadians when he has not recognized in any way the thousands, the millions of Canadian flags that have flown over the past 2 or 3 weeks. Thank you.
It being 3:25 p.m., pursuant to order made on Tuesday, February 15, 2022, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the motion at the second reading stage of Bill C-12. Convoquez les députés.
Calling the members.